Well, welcome everybody. It is noon Central Time, so we're going to go ahead and kick off this webinar and get us started on time. There's lots to accomplish and lots to discuss. Hang on really quick. I'm going to make sure everybody's in the room that wants to be. It looks like I have folks in the waiting room. I want to make sure they're not stuck in there. All right, we're all good. Okay, so I want to introduce our speaker, Lee Thompson. She's the J.J. Gerber Professor of Dispute Resolution and Organizations in the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. She has quite a few credentials, and you're going to understand why we brought her to you today as soon as I read all this. She's the director of the Kellogg Team and Group Research Center, the leading High Impact Teams Executive Program, High Performance Negotiation Skills Executive Program, and Negotiating in a Virtual World Executive Online Program, and co-director of the Constructive Collaboration Executive Program and the Navigating Workplace Conflict Executive Program. So I'm going to turn it over to her and let her teach you a few things about negotiation.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, and a warm welcome, everybody. Thank you for turning on those cameras. Can't wait to spend some time today rolling up our sleeves, talking about your place at the virtual negotiation table. So the pandemic, right, has in some sense presented special challenges for us. But the good news is that I think we can do a lot to, in some sense, improve our negotiation game, all the while focusing on the relationship we have at the negotiation table, as well as our economic interests. Both of those are completely fair game. So Sarah did such a good job introducing me. I feel like I'm 150 years old when she said all that, but that's okay. Those of us who've been around for a long time, eventually we're going to get something done. So these are some of my books on negotiation, and I'm not trying to sell these, but what I found is that over the years, I've tried to be a little bit more user-friendly in the books. So what do we know? Let's just kind of review the facts. I loved reading, kind of spent a lot of time reading the Crew Network benchmark study. I loved reading it, but it gave me, in some sense, a little bit of a dose of, oh, seriously, I keep waiting for us to round the corner. So I know you've read that study, and if anything, you know, the pay gap is here, it's widening. And once we start looking at things like, you know, bonuses and compensation, it gets even more magnified, and there's a reason for that. So when we start going into kind of what we call greater ambiguity, in some sense, a lot of those differences are magnified. But again, this is not going to be a depressing talk. It's going to be an uplifting talk. These are some other data points that I usually like to put up on my slide, because sometimes I find myself working with very young people. And when there's men in the room, they will innocently raise their Zoom hand or their real hand and say, oh, I thought that this was just a problem of my parents' generation, and somehow it all got worked out sometime in the 90s. And I say, actually, that's not true. As much as you'd like to think that we've all arrived and the problems are behind us. I talk to these people, elite business school grads. I say the pay gap is actually widening. So the woman to your left, the woman to your right, who's interviewing for the same job at whatever it might be, Goldman Sachs or a law and accounting firm, or maybe that person is, you know, trying to get a residency position. That person with equal skills is going to earn less than you, everything else being held constant. These salary negotiations, we're going to talk about all kinds of negotiations, but everybody studies salary negotiations. The very first salary negotiation that you do has a huge economic impact on the rest of your career. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but I happen to have a 21-year-old daughter who's about to graduate in the middle of the whole dang pandemic. And coaching young people who might not have a business background, who've lost all sense of social learning in the pandemic because they don't get to see what everybody else is doing. If you're willing to take a risk and negotiate that starting salary, and assuming you don't do anything else for the rest of your life, you just kind of imagine that you go through the same raises as the male, that is going to lead to a $600,000 difference because of kind of compounding issues. So that's the data point that I always share with my 21-year-olds, my 26-year-olds, the people who are saying, this is my first real grown-up job. Just want to say a few words about what the heck has the COVID era done. You saw the New York Times article. I think this was also in the Wall Street Journal. This term, it's been called the she session. Great. That can't be good news, right? So women have, in some sense, taken more of a hit during the pandemic than men. They represent 54% of overall job losses. And based upon base rates, it should be 43%. Men, this one just galls me. Men have increased their childcare and homeschooling 4.7 hours a day. Great, that's fantastic. Women are up to an additional 6.1 hours. I don't know whether we need courses in sleep deprivation or not. More women laid off than men. And here's the kicker. I get this question all the time. Thank goodness there's a research study. Women with no children, which presumably somebody could have said, well, that's the reason why we're laying you off. Women with no children lost jobs at a rate of 13.6% in the pandemic versus men who don't have kids at 9.5%. So something else is going on. It's not as simple as, well, you told me you wanted to stay home and get your kids through school. So don't leave me now. Sarah, tell no one to log off now, because I don't want people saying, well, this is a great start to the day. It just has put me in a bad mood. Is there any good news? Is there a way out of the wormhole? Yes, there is. We're going to talk about some very specific best practices that we can start putting into motion in your own toolbox today that we know from our research that could lead to a significant, I'm going to put a number on this, 10% improvement, because none of us can wait for, in some sense, the pandemic to end and magically we rectify everything. So we're going to have an opportunity for some breakout discussions. And let me just kind of set the table here, because through the power of Zoom, we're going to put you into some breakout rooms. I think we have a fairly large number of people here. So there should be probably, 15, maybe so people in a room. You're going to have an opportunity to discuss a job situation. Something tells me it's going to involve, a possible raise or maybe not. I'm going to give you 12 minutes because, we need a little bit of time to roll up our sleeves, assess the situation. So when you go in your breakout room, we're going to come in there and we're going to drop a hyperlink in your chat box. And it's a half a page, what we call mini caselet. All I want you to do is read the mini caselet, right? Read the mini case, and then look up at the people in your room and say, well, I know what I would do in this situation, Aubrey. How about you? Don't worry. And then we're going to pull you back here 12 minutes later, and we're going to pick your brain. We're going to see, well, how would you handle this situation? So with that, Sarah and Larissa, are we ready to kind of have people Zoom into their breakouts?
Yes, I will launch them right now.
All right, there's no question we all could have used more time. All right, there's no question. So we're going to set that aside. So I want to talk to folks. Do you remember? Let's see, Stacy, you're right next to me. That's probably not good news for you. What room were you in, Stacy? Do you remember? You're on mute right now.
Yeah, I was in room 8.
You were in room 8. So were the folks in group 8, you have to kind of speak from your collective experience, Stacy, were the folks in room 8 going to go ahead and have this meeting with Chris? Are you going to kind of, go for that raise, or maybe not now? How would you?
Yeah, we started off with maybe we should wait a little bit, like another month or so, but then
okay,
the majority,
maybe
Then the
Okay.
majority of the room, came back and said, no, I would have it right away because the review with the positive feedback is fresh in Chris's
Yes.
mind. And so
But there was that sounds like some of us were saying, I don't know, let's maybe wait. But then there was a majority saying, let's do it now because of the top of mind. So I'm kind of curious, Stacy, did you have a number in mind that you were going to use, or just go in and say, no, I just want to ask for this?
Yeah, we didn't get to
you didn't get to that. Do you have, and the folks that don't make Stacy do all the talking, if you were in Stacy's room, was there a strategy that you might use? I love your strategy of, in some sense, capitalizing on this great performance review. Any other concern or strategy or angle that came to mind, Stacy?
I'm honestly, unless somebody else from my room picks up on this, but I think we were just getting started, and really the strategy was just using that positive performance review to justify a salary increase.
To justify. Okay, that's really, and Stacy, thank you for doing that.
You're very welcome.
Okay, thank you.
I was also in room 8, and
Yes.
we were starting to get to that discussion of what number to ask for. And my thought was, if our colleague is making 5% more, we need to ask for a 7% raise, because they're never going to give us exactly what we asked for the first time. So you need to ask for a little higher, so that gives them room to come down and save face a little bit, so that you can probably at least still land where your colleague is.
Okay. I love your kind of strategic thinking, Jean, because you're right. If you ask for what you want, you're probably not going to get that. So I'm kind of curious, anybody in room 1, if you happen to remember what room you were in. I mean, sometimes I don't remember what room I was in. Room 1. All right, going. Anybody remember if they were in room 2? I don't think we remember our rooms, do we?
Well, we were in room 2. My name is
Shelley, thank you. All right, so talk to us. So Shelley, I'm kind of curious, what was the collective perception like in room 2? Was it like, heck yes, we should do this? Or was there also that, I don't know, maybe we should wait? Were there any concerns, or what was the general approach, Shelley, in room 2?
I think we pretty much will jump to, we need to go and talk to her immediately.
Okay, jump to this. Okay, did you have a particular number in mind? I love the clarity that Jean expressed, which is like, here's our target. It's going to be 7%. Here's the reason.
We discussed 10%, knowing that we need to go in above.
Well, hello, Dolly. Yes.
Well, and then in looking at the 5%, that's $168,000. That's a jump from 112. So
that's right. But your target, if I can use that word, your kind of North Star would be, well, we're going to go in with this kind of number. All right, I'm going very down. Yes, and I love your intuition. Like, if you don't reach for the stars, you're going to end up, somewhere a lot less than where you want to be. All right, so Kelly Boone, you're right in the middle of my Zoom screen. That's probably bad news for you. Do you remember what group you were in?
I was in room 2.
You were in room 2, so you were in Shelley's room. Okay, yes. Vicky, do you remember what room you were in?
Room 7.
Room 7. Okay, so yes. Vicky, talk to us about what happened in room 7. Were you let's have this meeting tonight? Or was it, well, wait a minute, maybe we should, think more?
Well, actually, to be completely honest, we had a awesome, engaging conversation amongst all of us, because it took a while for the case study to appear. So all of us were sharing, not all of us, 3 or 4 shared specific experiences similar to what you had posed in the case study about having to ask.
Okay, similar experiences. And I understand that some of the folks in the room, because of their firewalls, might have, not been able to directly access it. All right, anybody in room 3 or 4 that I haven't talked to? Room 3 or 4?
I was in 3.
Okay, great. Kristen, please continue. What was the collective? I kind of am interested in your gut, that first gut reaction when you first hear this, like, heck yes, or
heck yes.
Okay, and I
think
love
our
you.
room kind of settled on heck yes, now's the time, and we discussed lots of different reasons, but I think that's where we kind of settled, and someone can speak up if they're wrong. And then we kind of went with the 10% also.
That's
I think there was a
very interesting.
consensus to go higher.
Higher, yes, we have
We didn't-
everything.
Yeah, we didn't talk a whole lot about the how much, but I think there was a consensus.
Okay, and I love the beauty of your articulation. Heck yes, we're going to go for it. We're going to reach for the stars. All right, anybody in room 4? I'm just trying to get a little bit of a sample here.
I was in room 4. This
Yes,
is
Haley. Yes, Haley. Yes, please continue.
So our general consensus was that we should ask. Some of the concerns that came up were that the boss, Chris, seemed to be very busy and that asking for another meeting might not be feasible. Also, I think someone had shared like overloading with niceness and kind of blurring the lines between or not making room to talk about the salary conversation.
That's interesting. That's interesting. It sounds like this room, I'm very interested in whether you had a number, but it sounds like you guys were really doing a lot of contextual analysis. Did you get to the point, Haley, of saying, well, if we're going to seize this moment, despite the fact that Chris is busy and all kinds of things are going on, here would be a number. Here would be in some sense, a reach.
We did not get to a number.
You did not get to that. Okay. So anybody in rooms 9 and 10, I don't want to forget about you. Anybody remember being in room 9 or 10?
Room 10.
So,
Oh, Michelle, please continue.
We actually went to 15%.
Oh, 15%. And is that conversation hopefully going to happen very soon?
Yeah, we weren't discussing the immediacy, but certainly soon, coming off the high review. And then one of the strategies presented was to in a service industry that we could potentially justify that our billing rate could be increased based on our high performance, and that could easily justify the cost associated with the salary increase.
Right. And Michelle, I love the way that you're thinking out of the box. Rather than this come as a direct expense to the company, maybe there's a way to grow the pie here. All right. So there's a couple groups that I haven't talked to, but I'm going to change the question. Did any other room that I have not spoken to say, I don't know, we just seem to have a different kind of a conversation. Maybe it was different kind of concerns. Maybe it was we should do this, but not tonight. Anybody?
This is Heather. I don't know what room I was in, so sorry on that. And this is something I didn't bring up in my room, but I kind of had a thought forming, and I'll share it here.
Yes.
I'll be the data analyst here. I want information. So
you want
what
information.
I need before I have this meeting is figure out what I should be making, what the midpoint for my salary range is. Based on my zip code, my experience, all that stuff, get some salary survey information and come to that meeting with the facts to make my case, whatever that case may be.
Great. Because this rumor that you've heard, that's not in some sense a full deck of information. So you need more information. And Heather, just staying with you 1 minute, were the other folks in your room kind of aligned with you, which is like, yes, we can't make a move unless we really have, in some sense, a full passel of information, some metrics. Other people in Heather's room?
We needed to be prepared. I mean, Martha mentioned you can't just go in there, you have to be prepared and know exactly what you're going to say, which kind of sparked
you want to be prepared. You want to be prepared, and you'd want to be prepared in any situation. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Heather. Anybody else want to kind of share, just like Heather did we kind of had a little bit of a different thought process, and this was top of mind for us. Anybody want to share that with us?
Yeah, I'll add one thing. This is Barbara Champeau. I was in
Barbara.
7. Hi.
Yeah. Yes.
So in addition, I think there was consensus. Yes, you have to make the ask. If you're not going to get it if you don't ask for it. And secondly, what Heather just said, but you need to do so sufficiently prepared in advance to make your case persuasively with research and that kind of thing. But we also added, have your fallback position ready. Maybe you're not going to
Interesting.
get that 10%. Maybe you're not going to get that 15% plus. What's my fallback position?
Okay, that's good. In some sense, we're going to give a name for that fallback. It's kind of, what's my plan B? What's my plan B? Presumably my plan B is to just kind of accept the status quo, which I have reason to, in some sense, have a little bit of consternation with that. Okay, excellent. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in some sense, share with you something that, again, I want your reactions to. So it turns out that rooms 1 through 5, you might be saying, why is she so uptight about what room we were in? What the heck? Rooms 1 through 5 had a boss named Chris with a capital K. Chris is a warm, empathic, approachable, busy female. Group 6 through 10 had a boss named Chris with a C, who is a man, and he's described as hard driving, brusque, dismissive. There was even a story that early on in the pandemic, somebody got fired because they had the nerve to ask for a raise. You might be saying, oh my gosh, what's your point? What's your point? What we have found is that there is a perfect storm. This is in our research, we found that there is a perfect storm when it comes to willingness to initiate tough conversations about raises. 3 factors: negotiating against a man, and I hate to use this verb here, but negotiating across the table from a man who has an aggressive reputation. Chris is described as kind of brusque and kind of hard around the edges. And also, there were slightly different verbs used between the 2 caselets. In room 6 through 10, the question posed to you was, are you going to negotiate, Natalie? Are you going to negotiate a raise, Donna? In rooms 1 through 5, the verb was, are you going to ask, Tanya? Are you going to ask, Tori? And what we found in the research, which I'm about to share with you, is that women that we have studied have very different, in some sense, thresholds about whether they're inclined to ask or negotiate. Women say, well, ask, sure, you can ask for anything. But in some sense, negotiate means, oh my gosh, that means, I'm kind of rolling up my sleeves. So I'm just kind of curious, any reactions or thoughts so far? I mean, this was not a scientific experiment, but I'm kind of curious, Diane, Lisa, Jolene, don't worry. Now that you kind of know, oh my gosh, I had the tough guy, or I had a female boss who was very empathic. How did that affect your thought process?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, Lee, because I didn't speak up because I was eating, number one, sorry. It's 12 o'clock here in Texas. What's interesting, I was in room 9 and had the man. And the first thought that popped into my mind when I read your case study was, did he do that on purpose? Did he intentionally not give her the opportunity to bring that up? Is he intentionally trying to intimidate her into staying at the salary that she's at?
Right. And Cindy, I think that, first of all, I'm really glad you shared that. But in some sense, this whole kind of picture, that was conjured by this brusque man who has this, firing people, led you to think, oh my gosh, is there in some sense kind of bad intent here? Right. And so presumably, Cindy, all of us are kind of, thoughtful self-preservation, presumably that raised our apprehension level. And so what we found, and Cindy, your point is so profound, is I want to introduce a term that we have been doing a lot of research on. When we question women, look, what would keep you from asking or negotiating a raise or anything else in your business? It's very clear. They say, I'm concerned about backlash. It's exactly, in some sense, the concern that Cindy raised, which is, if I do have this conversation, what if it results in a very negative outcome? What if it results in my being, in some sense terminated, or my being, in the eyes of this person, negatively characterized? So backlash is a formal term, published research term, that women believe that assertive behavior, asking, negotiating, initiating, will elicit a negative response. The next question is, are you crazy, or is there reality? No, you are not crazy. I'm sorry, this is very depressing, but we can fix it. Male evaluators in the research penalize female candidates more than male candidates for initiating negotiations. It's along the lines of, Cindy, I really thought that you were happy here. I really thought that you were a team player. I really thought that you would feel that you were equitably treated. In some sense, how dare you? So that, what I've just role played, is an example of backlash. So women who ask, initiate, are seen as less nice and more demanding. This is a stereotype. Yep. Because presumably men stereotypically are thought to be more assertive. So no, it's not all in your head. That's the main thing I want to say. So when women say, I'm concerned, in some sense, there's a dang good reason to be concerned, because we know from the research that even though men might not be aware that they are treating women who ask and men who ask with very different responses, they are. So some of you probably read about this a couple of years ago. I actually saw this movie, All the Money in the World. That's not the point. The point of the movie is that Mark Wahlberg is A+ Hollywood actor. I mean, this guy makes so much money, it's ridiculous. But Michelle Williams is an A+ actress. She makes a lot of money, but guess what? They had to do reshoots of the movie for a variety of reasons. Williams was paid less than $1,000 for hundreds of hours of reshoots, and she made a $625,000 base salary. Mark Wahlberg was paid more money to do the reshoots than Michelle got for the whole dang movie. And her base salary was, his base salary was $5 million. When Michelle found this out, here's what she said. I didn't get mad at Sony Motion Pictures. I got mad at myself. I failed as a negotiator because I gave up early and I didn't want to keep fighting over millions of dollars that I don't need. Wanting to be liked influenced my decision to close the deal without a real fight. I did not want to seem difficult, spoiled, high maintenance. That seemed like a dang fine idea until I saw the payroll on the internet and realized that every man working didn't worry about being difficult or spoiled. So in other words, it's only when she saw the data that she said, you know what? This is not acceptable. I got very interested in this. This happened a year or two later. Late actor Chadwick Boseman, hyper talented actor, was so generous that he actually negotiated equal pay for Sienna Miller on their movie 21 Bridges. So he found out that Sienna was being paid less money for equal, I guess, screen time or whatever. And he fought and won. Okay. Miller said, this was the most astounding experience I've ever had, that a man somehow was fighting my battle. So I just am pointing this out as, in some sense, a generosity on his part. But I think the question we want to ask is, how the heck can I neutralize backlash? In other words, it's out there. You're not going crazy. So here's what we found in the research, which to me gives us a window of opportunity. Your fear of backlash inhibits your you're going for what you want. So what we've coached some women to do is, whenever they're starting to fearful of having a meeting, I'm trying to do this with my 21-year-old daughter. Oh my gosh, I'm so scared to have this meeting. What if they don't like me? If you can reconstrue fear as a learning opportunity, which is, yes, I am taking a risk here. I'm going to learn a ton. This might not be the worst thing that ever happened. Raising your threshold in this particular study, and I want to explain it because it's kind of interesting. It took me a while to kind of understand this. People, actually, men and women, were asked, what's the most amount of money you could ask for without causing a negative reaction in the people who you were asking for? And here's the interesting thing. When men were self-advocating, they said, I think I could ask for $50,000. I think this was some kind of an entry-level job in the, arts and sciences or something. Women said, you know what? There's no way I could ask for 50. They would turn on me. These people would hate me. I could go as high as 43,000. Then here's what was interesting, Lisa, and I'm just saying your name because I like your name. When we told people, this is not about you. You're advocating on behalf of a team. You're advocating on behalf of your constituency. You're advocating on behalf of being head of household or whatever the deal is. All of a sudden, women said, I think I can do that. If you're asking me to go in and represent my group and my people, I think I can ask for a little bit more. So one of the things that I often do when I'm working with young women is I get them to try to visualize a constituency. This is not just about you. This is about your retired self. You're in your 20s now. I get that. But at some point, you're going to be in your 40s and you're going to probably have dependents. So in some sense, if you can kind of visualize the team you're representing, it can raise your threshold. So I'm going to pause here and just do a check-in. Anybody have kind of a reflection or thought, even if it's like, gosh, Julie, I love the nonverbal body language. That's helping. Okay, so talk to us, Julie.
It's like I have a split personality.
Oh.
I'm fierce in terms of advocating on behalf of a client, but I am woefully ineffective in terms of advocating for myself.
So Julie, you are in some sense my poster child. I mean, I cannot tell you how many people have said that same thing, which is like, Lee, I am a bulldog. I am tough as nails when it comes to negotiating for my group or my team. But when it comes to me, I just put all that aside. Julia.
So I found that I have to channel my inner white male, period, to function in finance and make sure that I look at myself through the lens of how would I feel if I was a tall white male desired by the workplace. But my question to you is, do you have to sort of go into negotiations with a willingness for the backlash? Like, do you have to position yourself, well, if I don't get it, then I need to be prepared to move, because that would change how I looked at it and how I prepared to have the discussion.
Right. No, I think it's such a great question. By the way, I wrote down this term because, Julia, that could be a research study right there. Can you imagine asking people to mentally conjure up their inner white male? That's so provocative to me. But the heart of your question is, Lee, is what you're saying that once I kind of conjure this up or kind of get my constituency on and I go in and I ask, do I have to be prepared to, in some sense, pack my bags, get thrown out of the office, go with my plan B? And the answer is, I think we should always have a plan B, and we should make that plan B as attractive as possible. But I do think that the heart of this research, Julia, because you're so good at thinking about this, the heart of this research is that even though women are oftentimes more likely to be victims of backlash than men, they're still not pushing the thresholds that they could. So what we find, that's maybe not true of this group, is that our fear in some sense holds us back, and so if we can in some sense get over that. So what I want to do, and actually, Julia, this is perfect timing. Larissa, I think we have a poll question, and it's the heart of what I think we're talking about. Do we have a poll question? Yes. I have a very simple question. How confident are you as a negotiator? This is an anonymous poll. You can say what your heart is really saying to you, because I'm very interested in finding out how confident are you as a negotiator?
We are at about 70%.
Great.
Try to hit 85 and then I'll share the results.
I think if we can hit 80, that's a totally respectable response rate because we've got a really large group. Okay, that's awesome. All right, so I want you to look at this, Sarah. So 50% of us are saying I'm somewhat confident. Only 10% of this class is saying I'm very confident. There's a good 35% of us, over 30% of the group say I'm lacking. That's why I'm here today. Give me some solutions. Because what we're finding is that your confidence as a negotiator is a skill that you can work on and build. So here's what we find is that, actually, don't look at this junk. Don't look at this junk right now, Julia. So what we did to build confidence is we didn't just walk up to people and say, Kristen, you've got to build confidence. Tanya, we want you to find your confidence. That doesn't work. I mean, that's ridiculous. It doesn't work. What we did, and I hope Julia will appreciate this, is we told people, look, there's a lot of research indicating that the skills that it takes to be effective at the negotiation table are active listening, empathy, people skills, and relationship building. You, as a female, have these skills. So in other words, what we did is we, in some sense, told people it's, in some sense, these traditionally female skills that seem to have the best predictive power. And what we found, which was interesting, is that when women, this is kind of a tricky study, when women went into a negotiation believing that empathy, relationship building, people skills, active listening were the keys to negotiation success, they set higher aspirations. In other words, they, in some sense, rather than channeling that inner white male, which I think is interesting, they channeled that very relationship building, people focused, active listening female. That they said, I'm in the perfect position here. And then, Julia, what we did is we looked at women who approach negotiation as I've got exactly what it takes. All of these active listening, relationship building, people focused skills, they earned dramatically more money in a business simulation than the women, and this is kind of weird, than the women who went into the negotiation thinking negotiation is a man's game. So what's my takeaway? The quickest way to build confidence is to realize that negotiation is fundamentally about relationships, active listening, people skills, being able to pivot, build trust. And I have all those skills. So what we found is that leads to higher aspirations and it makes more money. So whenever women tell me, oh, I'm not a good negotiator, I say, why? You have exactly what it takes. That's exactly how you've reached where you are in life. So I got very interested when I started looking around, trying to do research on women who were very, very high level in their careers, such as this class, but actually worked in a traditionally male dominated industry. And I found this woman, her name is Alexis Stabler. She's an NFL agent. Can you imagine? She's like one of only like 3 women in the whole deal. And you know what her negotiation style is? It's fascinating. She says, let me tell you why I'm the best. I'm a woman. Yep, I'm a woman. I'm not a man. You can get a male as an NFL agent. And I'm going to tell you why my being a woman can be a huge asset for you when I represent you in these multi-million-dollar contracts. Because think about the people in your life, your mothers, your sisters, your baby daughters. They're empathic. I need to know if you're hurting. I need to know what makes you happy. I need to know what makes you fulfilled. You're only signing a 3-year contract, but this is going to be your career. I'm that person who can embody those hopes, dreams, and desires, and make sure you get what you want at the table. So what's my point? Is that she completely owns her style. She says, I'm blessed with these gifts, and I can use these gifts to be extremely effective for you. So I call this strategic assertiveness. And so what I want to do now is, I think Sarah sent you a little questionnaire. Maybe yes. And it asks you about your propensity to initiate negotiation. And I think when you looked at this questionnaire, and by the way, give me a little bit of jazz hands if any of you looked at the questionnaire. Give me some little jazz hand. Thank you, Vicki. Thank you, Cindy, because that's really great nonverbal feedback. So we asked you, in some sense, very simply, to go with your gut. Do you think most things are negotiable? Heck yeah, or shoot no. Do you think that situations should be changed to fit your desires? And then we also asked you about your apprehension. So this questionnaire gets at three things. Do you recognize opportunity? Do you feel that you are deserving? They use the word entitlement, but do you feel that you're deserving? And in some sense, what's your fear factor? As you can imagine, if this is high and this is high and this is low, you're going to be able to have the conversation. So what do we find in the research? As compared to men, women have lower recognition of opportunity, feel less entitled, and more fearful. All of those things can be fixed. They're not good, but all of them can be fixed. Here's a fascinating data point. I want Kristen's thought on this. Men were interviewed. When was your last negotiation? Modal response, 7 days ago, professor. Same women were asked in the same industry, when was your last negotiation? A month ago. These are men and women doing the same jobs. So what that means is one of two things. Men are seizing the moment at a 4 times higher rate. They're negotiating. They're on the negotiation tennis court every day. For every day woman is on the negotiation tennis court, men has been practicing 4 times. The other thing it means is that men are seeing kind of more opportunities. Oh, there's a window. I can do this. So if you can get the fear moved down, right, by thinking, I can do this. I deserve this. Here's a moment. Then you can be getting on that practice court as well, because it's all about this learning factors. I'm going to pause again and just do a quick check-in. Anybody have any thoughts or reflections they want to share, especially when it comes to this? Ooh, should I even pick up my tennis racket today? I kind of feel out of shape.
I would guess, are women not identifying? Are women not
Britt, are women not identifying opportunities?
Well, that they are negotiating. Maybe they're not putting the label because that's a question that I had, but you were saying that women are less averse to the word ask. But yes. I feel like women are often negotiating. I know we were talking about jobs earlier, but I think around the house, they're negotiating a lot with their partners, their roommates, things like that. And maybe they're not putting that negotiation seal on some of the stuff that they're doing at work.
I think you're absolutely right. So one working hypothesis is that women are actually doing what this study would call negotiating all the time. They're not mentally coding it as a negotiation because it doesn't feel like I'm on a car lot or something like that, or doing kind of a real estate deal, but they're problem solving, they're asking, they're kind of doing trade-offs, they're kind of trying to come up with a win-win. So what we don't know is whether that's context specific or not. If they're doing it at home, that's great. It'd be great if they could kind of transport that to other situations. Vanessa, you have your hand up as well. Okay, we don't have an audio, and I can tell this is like good stuff. Yes.
This is Libby.
Yes.
Can you break down the entitled? Because I think a lot of women, me included, I don't want to be entitled. I don't even like that. So
No, it sounds elitist, doesn't it?
It does. And it just is very
does.
uncomfortable.
Right. And so, but think of it this way, assuming we work with men on our faculty, I mean, can you imagine? I think situations should be changed to fit me, Libby, because I'm the center of the universe. I feel that I've earned the right for things to go my way. Just because I want something, it doesn't mean I'm entitled. This is reverse scored. So what's shocking to me is that I do agree with you, Libby, that on the surface, this seems like a pretty selfish person, that is really not going to be somebody I want in the workplace. So it's all the more surprising that men are more likely to endorse that than women, that they just feel like, the world kind of needs to change. So that's why, Libby, I think you make a profound point. I'd rather move the apprehension down.
That's what I was going to say.
I'd move the apprehension down. I think we have a couple of levers. I think if we can move the fear factor down, then I don't have to become this, in some sense, self-interested, egotistical, entitled person. And by the way, who made this? Britt, this one is for you. So this is the formal study where we use the verbs negotiate versus ask. When women were told, do you think you could go in and ask your team, ask your client if the following could be done? They said, well, I'm not intimidated at all. Hell yes. In other words, this is the intimidation factor. When women were said, well, do you think you could go in and negotiate with a client, negotiate with a customer, negotiate with your team? Oh, no. So, Britt, verbs are everything. Verbs are everything. And I love the thumbs up. This is a profound difference. Men don't distinguish these two verbs. It's fascinating. And then in terms of actual behavior, if I say, Britt, do you think you could go in and, ask if we all could, be allowed to, do the big project in the Midwest region? 73% of them said, yes, definitely going to ask for that versus 58. So what I'm saying is that if we could somehow get the fear factor down and in some sense replace the word negotiate with, yes, I'm very good at asking for things at home with roommates, but I also need to do a lot of this at work. So who said? Julie said she has a split personality, something like that. Julie, you're not the only one, because when women advocate on behalf of a group, their client, their customer, their team at work. This was a salary study with entry-level undergraduate students or something like that. In other words, these salaries probably seem low by today's standards. But if you look at the difference between 49K and 42K, that's almost a 10%, salary difference, which is going to make a huge financial impact. The men in this study, it doesn't matter whether they're self-advocating or team advocating, they're negotiating the same salary. So that's why I actually worked with a woman just the other day. She's getting her PhD in chemistry of all things. She says, Lee, I've never taken a course in business. I'm going to be moving into a laboratory situation. And I'm in the once in a lifetime position of being able to negotiate. They've offered me something. Should I ask for more? And of course I said, heck yes. And she said, I'm very uncomfortable. I feel selfish. And I said, well, who's going to be in the lab with you? Well, there's going to be all kinds of, interns and various people. And I said, well, do you want them to have a good quality of life in the lab? Yes. I said, well, then you've got to advocate on behalf of your lab team. And that seemed to make all the difference is that all of a sudden she realized, if she's feeling rewarded, in her situation, you know, she's going to be a role model for the few women that are part of this lab team. And that seemed to make a difference. So there have been stories of women negotiating cars who put on fake wedding rings just so they can say, well, I have to check in with my partner here. I can't make this kind of a concession. So whatever it takes to figure out who your constituency is, children that you haven't even conceived yet, your retired self, who figure out who can sit at that negotiation table with you. Does anybody have kind of a hack that they've used in order to negotiate a constituency? I kind of collect these stories.
Lee?
Yes, Connie. Yes. Oh, good. Yes.
I took a class about 30 years ago that has really served me well in working with men, because in our industry, we do deal with a lot of men, especially contractors. So I took a communication class for women, how to communicate with men. And they said that most men communicate with report talk and women communicate with rapport. So you have to, without losing yourself, try to be on the report side. So that has really been well. And it's the other woman who suggested that, going into a negotiation with, figures and that sort of thing. I think that's what, the sort of thing that I try to do.
Right. Now, I think that that's really interesting. So people like you are what we call negotiation bilingual. You can do the rapport, you can do we're all people here, but you also say, okay, I'm going to be at the negotiation table. There's 6 men here. Maybe they think that, they're very entitled or whatever. So I can come in with my charts, with my figures, with my value drivers, with my pain points, with my metrics. Great. We call that being negotiation bilingual. Britt.
I would say a big thing is, for many of us in commercial real estate, is negotiation is part of our job. And if we're not asking, we are not demonstrating to our employer that we know how to negotiate. Someone in our breakout group specifically mentioned this. I'm sorry, I'm missing your name, but she said when she got into a management position, she was disappointed that no one on her team asked for a raise or had salary come up. And so I think that's great first to go in and say, look, the reason I'm asking is because I want you to know that I'm asking on behalf of you too. And it doesn't always have to be about money, but this is a conversation I want to have to show you that I have the skill set. So your constituency can actually be your boss. And that helps you to not get undermined and, have your space at the table and be on the team. If you're not paid the same as other counterparts on your team, you might find that people are treating you differently. And I think the other thing too is trying to speak the same language. I loved a comment earlier about rapport versus report. I think if you look into, Myers-Briggs testing, like, get comfortable with what you are and get an idea of where your boss is or who you are, and try to use those words that you think will resonate with them and have a few different ideas of how to approach something.
Right, Britt, I love everything you said. And by the way, there is a technique called LSM, language style matching. And it's exactly what you're talking about, Britt, which is, there's been research, and I actually talk about this in my book. I didn't do the research, but it's fascinating. When you kind of can use some of the same words that the other person has used, I mean, you're not parroting them, but just kind of strategic language style matching, that you become very persuasive. So I want to get to Britt's point about the skill set. Some of you might be saying, well, you've put a little picture of Sheryl Sandberg down in the corner. What's the story with that? So Sheryl Sandberg is her own person. When she got that job offer to be COO of Facebook, before she wrote the book, Lean In, and so on and so forth, she was negotiating with Zuckerberg across the table. I mean, he was paying her a hell of a lot of money. And I guess she could have accepted it. But what she did is she said, look, I'm going to be your COO if this works out. I'm going to be the person negotiating major mergers, acquisitions, sales with all kinds of our stakeholders. You want me to be good at this job. So what I'm doing right now is I'm going to be asking you to change parts of the very generous compensation package that you offered me, because this is the only time, Mark, you and I are going to be on the opposite side of the table. Next week, if you hire me and I'm your COO, I'm going to be on the same side of the table with you when we are negotiating with our acquisition targets. So this is exactly what Britt just said, which is you want me to be assertive. You want me to lean in for Facebook. That's what I'm doing right now. So if you give me X, Y, and Z, great. I'll start tonight. Another person that I really like is Carly Fiorina. She's her own person too. All right. So one of the things we found, there's a lot of junk on this slide, but I think you'll appreciate it. I got very interested in the crew survey data that showed that some of these differences in compensation tended to be magnified when it came to like bonuses and stuff like that. And the reason why I'm interested in that is that, let's say a bonus is pretty ambiguous. I can't go on Glassdoor and easily find out information on what was Kristen's bonus or what's the, it's kind of murky. And what we found in the research, and this is very startling, is that when the situation is highly ambiguous, signing bonuses or boutique kind of industries, not a lot of data points out there. We have a huge delta in the wages offered to men and women with exactly the same credentials. When we have looked at what we call low ambiguity industries, so when, for example, my MBA students are thinking about, let's say, going into consulting, and there's hundreds of thousands of data points about what entry-level consultants are paid, and they all do the same research. Well, there's still an unacceptable difference, but this delta is small, this is huge. So you might be saying, what is your point? Whenever you find yourself going into a situation that has ambiguity, there's not thousands of data points. There's not a, in some sense, book of, here's what to do and say. You need to get or write the script. Some of you know the famous story of Carly Fiorina. So this is back in the day where she was CEO of Hewlett Packard, and she found herself in Korea negotiating a big business deal with Korean company Lucky Gold Star. That's not the interesting part. The interesting part is that she had never negotiated this kind of a deal in this kind of a culture. So she quickly found out that the negotiations would not start until after midnight, and the negotiations would not start until after there was this large multi-hour Korean barbecue with lots of drinking. She was the only woman in there. The males, the chairman of Lucky Gold Star explained to her that all of the men at the dinner would have a female escort. And they said, well, Carly, what do you want to do? Do you want to have an escort? She said, yeah, I'll take one. Next question. Do you want your escort to be a man or a woman? She said, well, what are the other vice presidents choosing? Well, they're all having a woman. I'll take one of those too, she said. This sounds a little X-rated, but Carly realized that the purpose of the escort was not anything lascivious. The escort was designed to make her look good. There was lots of scotch drinking going on in the evening. And at key points in time, the escort would take her glass of scotch, pour it out surreptitiously, making it appear that she could drink. And she said she never felt more composed, more articulate, more confident in her life. And it was a very successful negotiation. So the takeaway message that I give people is not to start bringing female escorts and drinking scotch. The takeaway message is when you find yourself going into the uncharted territory, find the script, write the script, research the script, because you want to disambiguate the situation. Ambiguity is not your friend when it comes to negotiation. So that's my story. Yes, Jessica. Jessica has a thought.
So I was going to ask the question, I'm familiar with scripting the situation, but one thing that I ran against was when I made the ask and, gave my scripted reason, the response I got was one I wasn't ready for, that I would like to make more money myself, but, working here at this company is more about, or not more about, but you have to also consider the culture, and which is true, but at the same time, the negotiation was about me. Can you say this is a negotiation about me and not about you to your boss?
Yeah. So yeah, I've kind of encountered that before. And that's another form of backlash, Jessica, which is, all of us here are people, Jessica. And, I want to make more economic money too, but I'm more about the mission. And I was really hoping you'd be as well. I mean, that to me is the undertone of what's said. So my feeling is that if we know that could be a likely response, what I often try to do is deflect it by saying, I know that we care about the people at this organization. I know that is the mission. And what I want to do is make sure I'm bringing my best self to that enterprise that you and I are both involved with. So this is what, I'm putting this out there because, I want to feel rewarded. I'm bringing a lot to this organization. And I would, in some sense, rewrite everything I was saying as to, if I am being rewarded this well, it's going to have a direct impact on all of the people culture that we're trying to achieve. So I think you were blindsided by this response. I know I've been blindsided by it before. So what I want to do is I want to kind of preempt that discussion. So I have a poll question for you. Who should make in an unscripted negotiation, who should make the first offer? I'm not talking about buying a car. I'm not talking about buying a house, where there's already a script. It's just like in an ambiguous situation. What do you think? Who should make the first offer? Larissa, let's try to get up to about, I don't know, maybe 70% or so.
Okay, we're at about 35.
Okay, lots of diversity in this group, which is fascinating for me to see. Okay, I think we're at about 70, so that's great. Okay, so what I'm seeing is we have a tripartite, actually we have a quartite distribution. I think that there's at least 20% of us who think the other party, 29% of us make the other person talk, 27. So we're kind of all over the map. So now I'm going to just give you some of the data that we've collected on this. So it's probably not what you're going to want to hear. So negotiators who make the first offer have an advantage only if you're prepared. If you are in a position where you don't have all the facts, then you shouldn't open first. So that's why I put a little star here. And some of you might be wondering, oh my gosh, me making the first proposal, that's dangerous. Well, it's not dangerous if you're prepared. It's not dangerous if you've been working in this industry and you know a lot of the numbers. The only way it's not a good idea is if you're going to be completely blindsided. So what we found is a shocking difference. Men are much more likely to make the first offer in some sense, an unscripted, not clear who should go first negotiation than women. In other words, we literally gave them the same caselet, not the one you had today, but a very similar one. 42% of the men said, yep, I think I'll be a first mover here. Only 28% of the women. what you want to do by going first is you want to anchor the negotiation in your favor. Because if you wait to hear what they have to say, they're going to psychologically anchor you. I see this in my own MBA classes. I give people much more involved scenarios. One woman came up with a great, plan for an opening offer, but the man beat her to it. And then she completely capitulated. She kind of accepted his terms. And I asked her after class, I said, what happened? You had this beautiful plan. She said, oh, his numbers were so much lower than mine. I felt that I couldn't put it on the table. So what I tell people is you have got to be ready to put your planned offer on the table. Okay. So the next question I have for you is with regard to making an opening offer, should you make a reasonable point offer, a reasonable range offer? How are we doing on the polling, Larissa?
It disappeared from my screen. I don't know
Yeah.
if it disappeared from
Okay.
everyone.
Yes, it disappeared.
Okay, here we go. I like what I'm seeing. Okay, so Larissa, I think we're almost at 75%. So I love what I'm seeing. This is fantastic. I love that 54% of us said make a specific point offer on the high end of our aspirations. And 35% of us said make a range offer that starts with the high end of your aspirations. This is kind of my last, kind of knee deep in the woods detailed research study. So we examined four types of offers. Let's suppose Britt, who by the way is right next to me right now. Sorry, Britt. Let's suppose Britt has a target of $100,000. I mean, maybe it's her salary, maybe it's, closing a deal, something like that. So what we found is that some people ask for point offers. I want 100,000, so I'm going to ask for 100,000. Some people made what we call a bolstering range offer. If I want 100,000, then I'm going to say, well, I'm looking for anything between 100 and 120. Some people did what's called a bracketing range. If I want 100,000, then maybe, Julia, I should just say 90 to 110. And then some people did the unthinkable. They went with a back down range. I want 100,000, but I'm scared that I'll look like it isn't great. So I'm going to say 100 to 100, 80 to 100. What's your point, Lee? You want to do bolstering range offers or point offers? Do not do this and do not do the bracketing range. I have observed all of the things being held constant among my MBA students and my executive MBA students who are approximately 10 to 15 years older. Women tend to make bracketing range offers. Men make bolstering range offers because women want to seem reasonable. Men are saying, well, this is reasonable, but I have a North Star. So if they beat you to it, if you have planned, Jean Marie, Libby, if you've planned, I'm going to go in, I have my bolstering range, I'm going to go in and they beat you to it. And Vicki, don't worry. I've seen this happening because what's happening in the virtual era is that even though I think Vicki and I are supposed to negotiate at 3 p.m. Central Time, she sent me an email 2 hours beforehand with her opening offer. So she beats me to it. So what I tell people is, look, in the age of the internet, people are doing preemptive opening offers. And I've seen this, by the way, a lot in real estate too. So what I tell people is, that's okay. You want to immediately counter offer with your planned opening offer. The magic words here are planned opening offer. So if Kristen beats me to it, and she is sent over a very low anchor, low or high, depending upon, whether I want a high or low settlement point. What I want to do is I want to say, Kristen, don't worry. Thank you for sharing your ideas with me 2 hours before our scheduled meeting. I've also spent some time preparing a set of closing terms that will work for me. Kristen, I'm going to warn you that my terms are dramatically different from the ones you've sketched. But in the spirit of recognizing the value of your time and beginning our discussion, I want to put these terms on the table. It's not enough to say no. It is not enough to say, forget it, Diana. It's not enough to simply reject it. You have to say, I hear you, but hold on to your seat. What I'm proposing is very different, but I'm a problem solver. I am here for a rich discussion of all of the value drivers. So I cannot emphasize this re-anchoring point enough. So we have about 7 minutes left. I've seen some women open beautifully in negotiation. They kind of use that bracketing range technique. They will immediately counter offer if the other person beats them to it, and then they lose it. What do you mean? Then they lose it. They don't know how to make concessions. Here's what I want you to remember. Do not make unilateral concessions, which is defined as you making more than one concession. In other words, 2 or more concessions in a row. We have a name for that. We call it negotiating against yourself. Okay, client Diane, I think we could close at 600,000. Client Diane isn't saying anything. Okay, maybe 550. Okay, Lee, be quiet. You exercise the gift of patience. What you want to do is you want to match the magnitude that the counterparty makes. Client Diane came up $42,000. I'm making up numbers. Maybe I come down 40. Client Diane just came up 7,000. Maybe I come down 5 or 6,000. Signal you are nearing your BATNA. By the way, that's your plan B, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Like, what the heck am I going to do if I don't sell to Aubrey, right? By reducing your concession magnitude. I'd rather have you make a large number of small concessions than one big kahuna concession. Jessica. Oh, I thought you had your hand up. Sorry, I thought you had your hand up. All right, so there's one more thing I want to talk about, and I'm very, very interested. I believe that Sarah sent you a very mysterious appearing scale survey called self-monitoring. And all I wanted you to do is kind of say true or false to each one of these interesting statements. I can make impromptu speeches on topics I know nothing about, true or false, versus my behavior is an expression of my true inner self. So I'm kind of curious, Larissa, I think this will be our last poll. Based upon the questionnaire, are you, Larissa, I think we have a poll that we can post up. Are you a very high self-monitor, meaning all true on the left, none true on the right? Are you kind of a mixed bag? Maybe you had some true, some false, both sides of the page. Or are you a low self-monitor?
Can you go back to that slide? I'm still unclear of the self-monitor.
Yes. So Larissa, keep the poll open and let me go back to the slide.
All right, we're just about at 70%.
Okay, let's give people just a few more seconds, just because.
Sure.
I have it. Yes. Thank you, Larissa, for your patience. Okay. All right. Now we can kind of close it up and see what we have. Okay. So the great majority of this class says, please don't try to characterize me one way or another. I'm probably a mixed bag. Okay. That's actually good. 24% of us are high self-monitors. Very, very, very few of us are low self-monitors. And that's kind of interesting. Maybe that's actually kind of good news. So here's what I want to say. And this data, I'm going to get my own brain around this. So if you are a high self-monitor, you said true. Yes, I can bullshit. Sorry. I can make speeches on topics I know nothing about. I would have made a good actress back in the day. If you're a high self-monitor, you're in green. Some of us, I will self-identify. Some of us actually, I'm a woman, but I actually score high on what's called trait masculinity because I'm verbally dominant, just to ask my students and my colleagues. I'm competitive. I am. I kind of, I used to race bikes and stuff like, that's who I am. Okay. So some of us are high masculine. Some of us are low masculine. We don't like to dominate. So in this particular research study, which is very interesting, I think they followed women across 5 or 10 years. These are women who are, kind of advanced business degrees. What's your point? This is the number of promotions that these women attained in a significant amount of time after they got a degree. Presumably, the way they're getting these promotions is by asking for them, putting themselves up for them. What's your point, Lee? My point is that the women who were high, so I don't want to put red there, the women who were high self-monitors, they would make a good actress, they can kind of read a room, and who were masculine, kind of dominant, seem to gain a lot of promotions. That's interesting. What's your takeaway? Please land this plane. The women who, in some sense, are faring the worst in their careers, and this is only one study, so don't worry, are the women who are low self-monitors, but dominant. What's your point? Please tell this story. The high self-monitors pick the right moment. They look around, they realize, here's the right situation. My boss is in a good mood. I've just had a positive performance review. We have a little bit of downtime before we start onboarding, a bunch of new stuff. This is the right time. This is the right place where I can make a pitch for my raise. Presumably, the low self-monitors who are not as good at, in some sense, reading the room, trying to adjust the situation, they're not picking the right moment. This is the author's interpretation of this research. So let me try to say a few things because I've had a number of women email me after this presentation, saying, oh my God, what if I'm a high masculine, low self-monitor? Should I jump off a bridge? No, don't jump off a bridge at all. I'm not going to tell you to become an actress overnight. This just doesn't work. But what I am going to tell you is that what you can start doing is learning kind of how to read the room, figuring out, oh, somebody looks a little bit frazzled right now. Maybe this is not a good time for a conversation. If you need to, figure out a colleague, perhaps in the crew network, who scored high on self-monitoring. Have them act as a coach for you, because I don't want you to think, oh my gosh, I'm screwed because, I don't have this. So what have we talked about? We've talked about focusing on your strengths to build confidence, lowering that fear factor by realizing that we can be bilingual in a negotiation. I can do the people skills. I can pull out that report. Negotiation involves both of these things. I can do both. This is, to me, the big kahuna. No one is going to send you a memo saying, Kristen, it's time to negotiate. Aubrey, today's the day. So you're going to have to disambiguate those situations and proactively initiate. Do not do negotiations alone. This is really not about you. It's about your productive self. It's about your future self. It's about you as a team leader. It's about you as a role model, right? So we've talked about getting that script. Okay, so I just want to take a moment because I don't like it when people don't respect time commitments. So I just want to take a moment to thank everybody for leaning in, telling your stories, being active and being engaged. I will tell you that I'm very, very excited about this network. It's a very rich network, not only in terms of the camaraderie and the people, but in terms of the talent. And I just want to thank Sarah for making this possible today. I know you did a lot of heavy lifting to do that, so I appreciate that. And back over to Sarah.
Well, thank you so much. And I know we're a couple minutes past, and I didn't know if, I know some of you have to go to meetings and things like that, so I welcome you to Bolt. We will have a recording for those of you registered. I know some of you, I got a couple of emails that there's a contractor in my house and I can't hear it. I want to absorb this. And so we'll have that out to you by the end of the week. And I didn't know, Lee, if people had questions, that they can stick around. Do you have a couple minutes?
Yes, I have about 5 minutes for my next meeting. And if you do have a question that doesn't get answered, let's take 2 questions, Sarah. If you do have a question that doesn't get answered, send it on to Sarah. I know one of the things that I'm going to do is I'll make this deck available so that you can go back and say, oh, I think I missed that point. So we'll make that available. So Sarah, why don't we take 2 questions?
Okay. Anybody want to raise their hand or jump off mic? I'll let it, oh, I see 2. Okay, Julia, go ahead. You're in my upper corner.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. This was great. My question is, how do you gauge the rhythm when your counter is countered? Like, how do you know how many times to go back and forth in terms of negotiations? And then you talked about maybe giving on the concessions versus your base, your minimum. How do you navigate that?
Right. So I'm going to just step back a little bit. There's not like a magic number of like, oh, go 6 times back and forth. That's a magic one. So what I often do is I do a little bit of table setting. I'm sure you do this too. So at the beginning of a negotiation, I might say, we're going to have a discussion right now. It involves, in some sense, a compensation package. It involves the terms of this deal. I will tell you right now, my number one goal, Julia, is for us to be in mutual agreement and both of us feel good about that. So I will be hyper processing. I'll probably ask a lot of questions. So in other words, I'm doing table setting because otherwise you might come to the conclusion that I'm being, in some sense, excruciatingly detailed. And so I might just say, we may or may not reach closure today, but my goal is to have a mutual agreement that's rewarding for both of us. So I'm not giving you do 6 iterations and call it a day. If you sense the other person is getting frustrated, just say, look, I get the impression, this is, maybe I'm not doing as much active listening as possible. So maybe we can pick this up later. And, I value your time. In other words, I'm not going away. I'm just going to come back later. All right, Sarah, how about who? Thank you so much, Julia.
Yeah, and I have a hand raised by Jessica as well.
Great, Jessica.
I don't know why my hand keeps going up, but I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I've done. Maybe I had it up before. Maybe I need to take it down.
Right. I did get a question in the chat. Let me scroll back down. The chat's just rolling. All right. What is the best way to know where you should be in compensation other than checking Glassdoor? Coworkers not talking, so no idea where I am in comparison.
Yeah, so you can't expect your coworkers to talk. And as we know, in some organizations, they're not supposed to talk. That would be illegal and various things. So if you're in an unambiguous industry, great. There's all kinds of data out there. Glassdoor, I guess, being one of them. I think, Indeed, ZipRecruit, there's a lot of metrics. I find that a lot of people, especially if they have a cohort of friends or colleagues that they, for example, graduated with, who are in the same field, maybe people who are on this Zoom call today, to the extent that you have kind of a trusted network with them, they have a similar background, they have a similar job title, you could kind of see what is their compensation. Sometimes you can actually not apply for a job but kind of look at, you know, what the pay being offered for those types of jobs are. So I do believe more information is always better. It's shocking to us that sometimes people under research. You don't have to have Gallup polls of, you know, but whatever research you do can usually only help you. So that's kind of my quick way of responding to that, because you don't want to go in without doing any research and ask for something that's just unrealistic. You know, you want to say, well, you know, I've looked at this and here's how much I could be making at these other firms with my skill set, talent, number of years of experience. So just came here to kind of do a talk through. Okay, so Sarah, why don't I'll plan on sending the deck and then you can collect some further questions.
All right. Well, if you have a question, email me, ask sarahc@crewnetwork.org. But otherwise, thanks so much for your attendance and your engagement. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Larissa, for punching the buttons today. And this was great.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.